Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. Don't worry about it. Hopefully for a somebody. My name is Kyle Noronha, and then on episode 121, I shall be reviewing Kraven the Hunter with Chris Pagonis.
I'm glad you said your name because I thought you were Russell Crowe for a second there. That impersonation was spot on.
I've been practicing in the car.
Why do you need to practice? Why? It's obvious Russell Crowe didn't.
Well, he's got a bunch of weird accents. We'll get into it. So yes, Chris is back. You only join us for like monumental events or Sony's Marvel movies, apparently.
What else am I good for? Really? Come on now.
Yeah, I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine was super fun. But go back to episode 100. That was a big deal. As already stated, this is episode 121. We are going to be talking about potentially the end of SPUM, the Spider-Man shared movie. It's got such a stupid name, I messed it up. But it's now called Sony's Spider-Man universe. So whatever. And it's over, maybe. We're not sure. The reports are mixed as to what the accuracy of that is.
I mean, we can only hope at this point.
It's very true.
It's not.
Kraven the Hunter will be a non-spoiler review and then a full spoiler review. And then just for fun, because sometimes it's enjoyable to dunk on bad movies, Chris and I are going to rank all 6 SPUM films individually. And then we'll see where each of the films lies, because I think there is going to be some surprises, which will be fun. So let's jump into non-spoilers. So no need to worry if you haven't seen the film yet. We're not going to talk about any plot details, character twists, or any of that sort. We are just going to talk about our feelings about the product in front of us. And I'm calling it a product because that's how Sony treats these films. Let's go.
My son, we are hunters. The greatest the world has ever known.
I have a prediction that I would bet with certainty many, many things. My house, my collection of Blu-rays and DVDs. Like my confidence for this is so high
that I think then.
This is not a joke, which is I guarantee they're sitting around in a Sony boardroom. Somebody draw this up. I'm not trying to still pitch meetings from Screen Rant. I love those things. So I don't even know if they did a Kraven one. But I guarantee they're sitting around like, all right, Venom. Okay, Morbius. Who's a guy we can kind of like ambiguously make like not a villain or whatever? And somebody went Kraven. They're like, oh, the guy who kills all the animals and then like eventually gets bored and wants to kill Spider-Man. They're like, no, this time he hunts man. Like, and that's the pitch. Am I wrong? Like that's
and everyone on the boardroom was like, oh yeah. Oh, we didn't see that coming.
Can you? Yeah, that hat, right? Like, I would win. There's no way that's not what happened.
Actually, in my mind, I just pictured a bunch of Muppets just like losing their minds.
Yes. So it's in the trailers for this. I think the best conversation to honestly have, and we'll probably it will encapsulate our general feelings for this, which is my main takeaway from this, and it's kind of gone back and forth after we saw it, was this is the best actor committed to a bad movie that we've had from them. And I say that because, and this might be cards on the table for some stuff that we're going to talk about later, Eddie Brock is not Eddie Brock in the Tom Hardy trilogy. If you've grown up with any version of that character, that's not him. And Aaron Taylor Johnson is a phenomenal actor. Go to films like Nocturnal Animals, Bullet Train. He is very capable of doing a wide variety of genres. Fall Guy, and coming up, he's got Nosferatu in 2 weeks. His commitment to this is admirable because the irony to me is the holidays are coming. We've got kids. We've been watching. You go through the every yearers as I've labeled them, and we watched A Muppet's Christmas Carol. And I'm not saying Aaron Taylor Johnson is Michael Caine in A Christmas Carol, but what I am saying is his level of commitment is one of the only reasons this movie works.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, hands down. And one of the only commitments we've seen in the Sony universe, like on a whole, yeah.
The clip that introed our Madam Web review was us trying our damnedest not to emote.
Right.
And welcome to the show.
Right.
Right? And in this film, it's a combination of an interesting problem, specifically with this part of the whatever the SSU, if they want to call it that. It's SPUM. It should be called SPUM.
SPUM.
Where the level of commitment to the world of Kraven, like all the staples are there. I really appreciate that. There's a character that is sort of built up throughout this that, if you know anything about Kraven's family, I thought was a compelling enough, I would argue, C story. I wouldn't say it was a B story. But that's kind of the biggest problem is there's too much. And I'm going to coin a term that friend of the show, Kofi Outlaw, created around the movie I, Frankenstein, which was when a movie was clearly so cobbled together through reshoots and everything, but it manages to work. Again, we're grading these on a scale of the SPUM universe films, where this film is a disaster, but there are elements of this, like the thing that you and I said, and we agreed unanimously, I mean, it's two of us, so it's not really hard, was this Kraven, even with all the powers and whatever, that to me doesn't actually bother me. You're trying to create, and if they were lucky, a Kraven universe like they got with the Venom ones, where because of how talented Aaron Taylor Johnson is, and I feel like I have to just say his whole name every time I say it, this guy, like this version, would have worked so well in an Amazing Spider-Man film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the craziest thing to me. And I don't really typically do news on this podcast because so many people are going to give their general impressions. And if you get more information, then it makes those pieces of the podcast just even less frequent. Movie reviews, people see things when they see things. That's just a little inside baseball. If you're curious why, Kyle never really does that. But it was really funny to me. I don't know if you saw this, that with the legal transfer of Spider-Man, or the sharing of the Spider-Man specifically within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it never said, this came out, I think today, the day we're recording this, that Sony couldn't have their own Spider-Man in these films. So it makes them seem even more inept. Also, just drive the dump truck full of money to Andrew, and I think he probably would have done this one.
Right. Yeah.
And this movie's attempt to be like, well, no, they're not the villain. But I give the movie credit because it actually puts that mirror up. It's like, no, you're still the bad guy. Like, we had fun with this, but this movie's a mess. Chris, what did you think?
Absolutely, the movie's a mess. I think this thing definitely struggles from what we were talking about a week earlier with the Moana, that you have something that almost seems like it's made for television. And in this case, I feel like this would have succeeded better as a Netflix series. They could have gone into more stuff. We could have excused the really bad shooting and out of sync stuff that sort of comes up that you're like, why is this even a thing? Like in 2024, do we not have test audiences and reshoots and able to do? I know we're doing things really quickly and trying to just mass produce stuff and get it out as quick as possible to pay people less. But I mean, all movies are suffering this year, and this is no exception, right? It just seemed like you said, they had one thought and they were like, okay, that's all we need. We don't need a script supervisor. We don't need to go over anything. We're just good. Like this'll work itself out. And the thing that's so baffling is this one and Venom, they're the exact same movie, right? You've got a super villain who's treated as an anti-hero. They're not bad guy, but they are bad guy. Like, they're trying to play that line, but that's not what they are. And you've got so much source material to work with. Like, why? It just doesn't make sense why it's so messy, especially for the sixth movie that they're doing. You'd think that, all right, someone's got to step up and do something, right? And I mean, we've got shows that are better than this, but it is just nothing was explained, nothing was thought through.
No, this film more than I mean, I think it's emblematic of all of the SPUM films where in the older style to which comic books used to be written, and you can go back and kind of find these, is it was really led by the artists and then dialogue was put in later. So your Steve Ditko's, your Jack Kirby's, your John Romita Seniors. I mean, Bill Finger did everything. Just go and look that up. And this film felt like we had to have a checklist of the things people know. I'm really glad you brought up the streaming aspect because it is an element of the Marvel shows on Netflix. Now, this is not to mean like they're bad. No, Luke Cage was great. Jessica Jones was great. Daredevil was absolutely incredible. Iron Fist is garbage. But that hesitancy to embrace your comic bookness, which is, I feel, still a archaic thought process left over from the early Fox era stuff of X-Men, where this film is trying to be, you know what it was? I'm just coming up with this now. This learned all of the wrong lessons from the first Aquaman, which why that film works is because it's Jason Momoa, so wildly entertaining, but the origin story stuff is a disaster. This film does that stuff, and we can get more into it in spoilers, but there is something they do with the character near the very end. I went, really? Like, you've shown this in the marketing. Like, Sony, should have learned from this mistake. And a part of the big issue with this film is, and if you're watching it with a keen eye, you'll probably be able to tell, sort of. I mean, this isn't wig gate from Fan 4 Stick, where you can, reshot, not reshot, not reshot, go back and forth with Kate Mara's wig. But this film, and it's been pretty public that the Rhino was just going to be teased and then potentially held off for another film. And there are elements of that character in this. And the way he is just sort of jammed into the rest of the movie, and we can really dive into this later. There's not a ton to talk about in this because of the simplistic nature to how all the character beats are kind of run down. I know there's some stuff we want to talk about that we did really enjoy. So I feel like leaving this as it's a fun mess is probably the best place to leave it for now. What do you think?
Great action sequences. Like, we were actually surprised how good they pulled off some of them. And again, it was him leading it and going through it. I think his commitment to it absolutely sold it more than anything else. He's got his Tom Cruise run down packed. That was awesome, right? But otherwise just a mess.
All right, so we're going to jump into spoilers. I obviously know we're leaning more negative, but I think the irony is as Chris was saying, the action and some of the changes actually make why this film is at least entertaining and not boring, which has been a crime of some of the other more recent SPUM movies, specifically with Morbius. And Madame Web was almost so bad it was funny, but this is a whole different thing. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, we're going to jump into spoilers, talk about all the plot details, twists, character reveals that have actually been kept from us in the marketing. So jump out now and then maybe jump to the time code when we start ranking all of the SPUM films, and you can find out what I'll be reviewing next week. You have been warned.
Boys, your mother is dead.
She died because you sent her away.
She was weak, sick in her mind.
The first thing I want to talk about is kind of a combination of the changes that led to the action sequence that both of you and I were like, wow, this is not in the right movie, which is a lot of people, they lost their minds that Kraven had powers. He's supposed to be the world's greatest athlete, and that's what makes him comparably go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man in the comics and whatnot. But what I found so comical, and I know you'll know this, the best animated Spider-Man show of all time, Spectacular Spider-Man, gave Kraven powers. And I mean, in that version, he turned into a full lion man. So this animalistic genetic manipulation of Spider-Man villains, it ain't new, people. So maybe simmer down. I think I said that in the first trailer for this whenever that came out, and how that sort of weaves in the story with Calypso. I'm glad she's in this, but one of the things that you and I talked about is Ariana DeBose or Bose. I'm not sure which one. Tell me if which one it is. That she's not in enough stuff. Like she's
No, not at
Academy
all.
Award winner and was brilliant in West Side Story. And I'm glad she'll be in Love Hurts in like 2 months, but she's not in enough stuff. And having Kraven be amplified, I would argue he's kind of like an animalistic Captain America, the way that he moves, particularly in this movie. I love the, like, we were joking to each other afterwards where he's clinging to walls and nobody goes, he's climbing like a spider, or like have a line similar to Madam Web when they were being chased by Ezekiel Sims. And there's an action sequence that's in a large portion of this that feels like a brilliant combination of the Winter Soldier chase and the Civil War chase.
Yeah, it was a really good sequence, and like the use of, I don't know, the use of the one thing that I've been appreciating with most of the action films is the use of terrain, and not just being like, okay, this is a chase on a ski hill. All we can do is ski. This is a road, a car chase. All we're doing is doing cars. This went from building to building, went into cars. We had a transition to a helicopter, and it was awesome to see. It was done technically proficiently. It was well done. It was awesome to watch. You could tell that they had taken the beats and gone through it properly. So it was awesome that they took the time to really plot that out and figure those out. They had a start and ending to where those sequences were. I just wish they had done that with the story more than just the action sequences. And weren't there like 2 main action sequences that were quite good?
Yeah, I mean, the variety was also something I really appreciate. And I know, obviously, Aaron's known for getting into incredible shape. He's pretty much been doing that since Kick-Ass 2. And they maintain, and this is one of the things we talked about in spoilers or in non-spoilers, which is maintaining that animalistic nature and within his movement. Like, he's not moving like Spider-Man. He's moving like, and I'm going to use this pun, a predator. The prison sequence in the very beginning where we see him do his first hit, I guess, and the parkour elements, the way he moves through the prison. There's a lot of movies with prison fights, but the way that he moves, almost like a wildcat, not a Troy Bolton wildcat, but an actual like wildcat. That's a High School Musical reference that went way over Chris's head.
Too old for that one, I'm afraid.
But that sequence is really cool, and getting to see him be like feral to some degree. And in the I'm just going to call it the Captain America sequence, you're right. Like the use of downtown, wherever they are, and putting different obstacles in his way. Like we get the scene where he's on the car and he goes all Terminator, but then we also get as you said already, his Tom Cruise run when he's running through the buildings. And then also weaving in parkour, where it's the first time in a long time where I'm like, I know there's some CGI doubles in here, but they really thought this sequence through. Like it's been 18 years since Casino Royale, which did the last truly great parkour thing. And then Captain America had some elements in it that were really good. And then even the helicopter sequence, like I was joking in my head, like, oh, he's going to do the Captain America thing. But he's not at that level with his strength. So getting to see him really struggle, that easily could have been the ending when he's on land trying to tie it down, but then bringing it into the water. Like the through line in this sequence was really thought out. And you're right. If you do that with the script for this, when you're in draft 2 or 3, you probably wind up with a more cohesive movie. And one of the things that I think would have really served the story better is, as opposed to having Dimitri sort of just be this guy on the outside, it should have wound up being he was the true villain behind this whole thing. Because him just being like, I love the Chameleon, and it's unfortunate it's taken however long. I want to say it's something like 60 years to get him into anything live action, where the true villain winds up being Papa Kravinov, played by Russell Crowe, Nikolai Kravenov. He's been behind it because he wanted to use his son with this because he no longer has a relationship with Kraven after Kraven's mom dies, and Kraven abandons Dimitri to be raised by Nikolai, where he was really pretty much being raised by Kraven. And there's this big reveal, oh, it was you the whole time, and then it gets mauled by a bear. But they have this through line that I think would have been much more interesting if Dimitri's character evolution to evil was more present than, oh, I learned a lot in this cutscene, like, because they jump 1 year later. And I like the stuff building up to Miles Warren. But again, this to me speaks to, and no, this is not just throwing shade at this universe, but just in general, like Miles Warren as a character is someone you should have just had throughout all these movies. We had a Morbius, we had a Madam Web. Last I checked, those have people with animal-based powers. Why is this a guy you're introducing now? Like, this is similar. This is, to me, they took all the wrong lessons from DCEU and did it worse here because there's no connective tissue outside of Morbius saying, I'm Venom. And you don't,
absolutely.
like, right? Like Russell Crowe being in this movie less makes it better because having the actual conflict be between the two brothers, to me, makes for a way more interesting story. For one, you get a size difference because Dimitri just in build is way smaller, but you have somebody using their brain, and as smart as Kraven is, but all of his tactics and whatnot come from a more animalistic base, right? Like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not habits. It's, what's the word? Like natural tendencies. What's the
instinct?
Instinct. Thank you. Like because that's also one of the funny things to me about this movie, where it's a little inconsistent, where he's like, I'm the greatest tracker, but I need you to find these people. But why? Like, you were given a vial of magic something from Africa. You find her 16 years later and you found her. Like, you did it. And this is probably the best place now we can talk about there's like a 20-minute origin story just in the middle of in the first hour of the movie.
Yeah.
It's not eloquently
not done well.
No, it's not eloquently cut up. It's like, here's Kraven doing something awesome. Now we're going to tell you how he got here, sorta. We don't learn how he was trained to fight with his powers. Like, we don't even get, and this is Spider-Man. Give us a Spider-Man thing where he's figuring all this stuff out. Like, we see him look really far and realize he can jump.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden he can do everything. Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
And even the whole thing with Calypso, it was terribly handled. Terribly sort of.
Yeah, that's his love interest. Like, the closest they get to a connection is they both like wearing leather at the end of the film.
Oh, and he absolutely just literally takes her out of her world to this abandoned place in the middle of Siberia. And she's cool with that. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing would happen there with this literal animal of a human. He wouldn't do anything to harm her. Of course not. So yeah, it was fully believable. Absolutely. Yeah,
well,
they're just
Go ahead. No, you clearly had something.
There was just so many missed opportunities that they seemed to scratch upon and want to build on, and they just didn't. They just wanted to give you a hint of everything, and that's why it felt so much like a TV show to me and not like a movie. Like, if they had an episode to deal with this, I can understand that. Okay, this makes sense. We can go into this. We can go into the Rhino. We can go into the random guy with sunglasses who shows up and then is killed and gone away. Like, it was just so many things were thrown together, and they don't need to be. Like, when is Sony going to understand that simplicity is key? Like, just bring it right down. You're right. The chameleon should have been the bad guy the whole time.
That's a great point. We haven't even talked about that yet, which is, okay, the foreigner is shown up and he's got like phasey powers. And his storyline, I don't know, maybe I misinterpreted it, but in the beginning, it makes it seem like he's hired by the Rhino. But then when they meet, he's like, oh, you're that guy. And it's like, didn't you hire him?
Yeah, exactly. I thought the exact same thing. It didn't make any sense. And then all of a sudden they're adversaries, but then they're okay. Like it did not make any sense to me.
No, I think if you okay, so here's my pitch for simplicity's sake, and this is obviously easier to
Yeah,
do retrospectively. I'm aware of that. However, when
obviously.
looking for what these screenwriters have worked on, you ready? I'm going to give you a rundown of what the two of the three have worked on. Okay, Iron
But
Man,
just
but
before you say that,
yeah,
this is what test audiences are supposed to be for, or used to be for.
yeah.
Someone would watch this and go, "This doesn't make any sense. Who's going through this test footage?" And is there no one doing that anymore?
Apparently, I
All
don't know.
right,
All right,
go
so
go.
all right, well, Iron Man didn't really have a screenwriter. We know that. Like that was an experiment that worked. So after that, they worked on Punisher Warzone, Transformers The Last Night, Men in Black International, and Uncharted.
Ugh.
Yeah. So there's Sony yes men, honestly. Okay.
This is essentially a Punisher movie.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they just take the script. Like he's just I kill to make the world a better place. Like it was literally just I wasn't watching Kraven, I was watching Punisher.
I mean, I outside of Aaron, like this is a positive. I think like Aaron is great in what he's expected to do.
He's great.
Yeah.
I personally believe this movie, above some of the other ones that they've put out, had the most potential to be good. And that's part of the reason why I'm even more upset about this one, that they actually had the building blocks in there where this could have been great with a few tweaks.
So, okay, so here's where I think this is simplicity. I mean, you could argue complexity. So, well, let's see if you agree with me. So, you have, I think, the inciting incident. You can still have the horrible origin story, whatever. I mean, maybe cut it up throughout the beginning of the film, or just open with that. Honestly, like make that the beginning. But the inciting incident, as opposed to Dimitri's birthday, have it be the funeral or alleged funeral of Nikolai, because we haven't seen Dimitri. Like, you need to see him at some point, I guess. But then if you have Dimitri pulling the strings to have Nikolai and Rhino going against each other, knowing that brings in Kraven, and then you have somebody pulling the thread, and then you could have, and this would be really cool, instead of the foreigner, we have this assassin who is the foreigner, not is the foreigner, fills that place, who we have no idea who it is. Who is this guy who's like the silent assassin? And then that can also be the chameleon. Like, you get to really stretch the chameleon's like espionage skills as
Right.
opposed to essentially a post-credit sequence. And then you make it a battle of these two brothers, like Wits versus Brawn. That would have been so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since at one point you identify his only weakness, Kraven's only weakness, is his brother. So this is the perfect thing to exploit and be like, oh, it was the brother.
When you give him an animal to fight, right? Because we have Rhino for the brawn, then you have Dimitri for the brain. Like, I think that would have made way more sense. I honestly don't have much more to say about this at all. Do you?
No.
No.
Like, I'm just so disappointed. Like, 6 movie through.
This is a good, though, like 2 p.m. on TBS film, though. I think if you're half paying attention, you won't be mad. Like, there are other films I think that would make you mad. So we're going to end spoilers there. I don't believe any are going to come up in our SPUM ranking. So
no,
feel free to avoid that if you think there might be, but I honestly don't foresee any coming up. So for listeners who are unaware, the Sony Spider-Man universe, or SPUM, is Venom, Venom Let There Be Carnage, Morbius, Madam Web, Venom The Last Dance, and Kraven the Hunter. So Chris, starting at number 6, what do you think is the worst SPUM movie?
Madam Web.
Okay.
I hated that movie. I thought it was terrible. Terrible. There's usually something in these movies that you like grab onto and you're like, oh, that was actually good. I did not see it in that movie at all.
Perfect.
How about you?
Oh, you want to go back and forth?
Or do you want to go back and forth, or do you want me to just do mine and then your whole one?
Let's do your whole one, and then you can react to mine. So number 5, Chris.
Number 5 was Morbius.
All right.
Morbius was a disappointment to me because you have Matt Smith and you have Leto in there, and there was so much potential there. We're talking about Aaron Taylor Johnson and what he was able to do, and you're like, oh, I see that he's a good actor. I did not see that out of these two, and those two are usually phenomenal. They can usually, do something with nothing, and they just couldn't in that one, in my opinion.
Fair. All right. And number 4?
I'm going to put Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage there.
Okay.
Because I felt it should have been more of a bump than there was from number 1. And I don't know. Number 1, Venom was more fun for me. And number 2, I was expecting them to be, and I just thought it was more flatlined than I was expecting.
Okay.
I hoped a little more for it.
Sure. That's fair.
All right.
Number 3?
Number 3, Kraven.
Okay.
I'll give it that. And Aaron Taylor Johnson, I think, is the main reason for that. I think we both loved him. And I think halfway through the movie, we were like, this is like a demo reel for him. He's going to get other people to see this and be like, oh, he can do this, right?
Yeah.
But I just felt like there was so much potential with this one where the other ones didn't.
Okay. Number 2?
All right. Number 2, Venom 3.
Wow. All right.
I felt like they were just like, you know what? This is just bonkers at this point. And I feel like I admire that to a certain, where the other ones they tried, and this one I feel like they were like, you know what? No, Tom, you just do you. Have some fun, dude.
All right. And then number 1 is, of course,
I would do Venom number 1.
Interesting.
And you know what? It might be because of when we saw them in the order too.
Yeah.
Because Venom, we were like, oh, do we have high hopes for this? Do we not have high hopes for this? And then we saw it and we were like, oh, okay. Then the second Venom, we were like, well, we're expecting it to be better. And then it wasn't. And we were like, oh. And then the bar just kept lowering.
Mm-hmm.
And now when we got to Kraven, the bar is on the floor. That maybe I'm thinking it's higher than it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I could see, we'll get into mine. All right. So number 6.
All right.
I have Morbius, and the reason Morbius is number 6 is because even with bad movies, and you and I have seen our fair share of bad films, there used to be, we haven't done it in a bit. We should start it. I may put at the end of episodes where it's like, how many times is Kyle going to sigh in this movie? That used to be, a predictor going into it. And Morbius's crime against films is it's boring. It's so boring. You're right. Like, even if it's bad, Jared Leto and Matt Smith in Bad Things are still insane. Like, they're still wildly entertaining. And Matt Smith clearly knew what movie he was in. But yeah, it was so bad. And then okay, it's probably going to surprise you. 5, I have The Last Dance, because similar to Kraven, and I did a whole review on this, which was the inclusion of already used Marvel actors, acknowledging the multiverse and then doing nothing with it, felt like you only cast them for the trailers. And I will not forgive you for that, because outside of that, you could have just had unknowns and it wouldn't have mattered. And yes, I know actors play different people, but when you just had Venom travel the multiverse, maybe do something with it. So that really bothered me. Madam Web is number 4. And the reason Madam Web is number 4 is because it is awful, but it is a movie. If I was consuming anything that you have to be a legal adult for, and they're like, let's watch Madam Web, I'd be like, yeah, all right. Like, it's going to have drinking games like Batman Forever. You die.
You're more generous than I am. I wouldn't watch it again. Okay. I just would not.
Yeah. And so that's number 4. Number 3, I have Let There Be Carnage. It's kind of, to me, the perfect example of where these movies went, which was Venom, and we thought Andy Serkis coming in, you're bringing in Carnage. Woody Harrelson, when he wants to be, is a great actor, and he showed up and was just Carrot Top, and that movie is a mess. Yeah. It also introduces a character who should have been Toxin, who they just completely abandoned in Venom 3, which really pissed me off. That's another reason it's at 5. So Let There Be Carnage, you have kind of an example of where SPUM went, which is to me the most disappointing, but it's not as bad as Madam Web, Last Dance, or Morbius for me. And then number 2, I have Venom. because of how absurd Tom Hardy is in that movie. He's wild. And it was like, Ruben Fleischer was like, Tom, you do Tom. We're just going to run the camera and we'll find a movie in there. And it was this beautiful accident. And it made almost $900 million. And
Right.
they thought they could do it again and again. And clearly they didn't. So it's number 2 because I would watch Venom again. And the number 1 is
Yep.
Kraven, because through what we talked about in this review, Aaron Taylor Johnson sells this character. Even though this movie is not good, if they went, guess what? We're doing Kraven's Final Hunt with Andrew Garfield and it comes out in 2 years, I'd watch that in a heartbeat. Like, do I want to
Right.
see Tom Hardy's Venom anymore? Or Jared Leto's Morbius, or any of the webbed swingers from Madame Web? Absolutely not. But you sold me the main character. And for that, I think you should be commended. So you are the top of the pile of crap that is SPUM.
See, but I think it's worthwhile noting that we're talking about a list that's like 5 out of 10, 5.1 out of 10, 5.2 out of 10. Like, these are so interchangeable that anyone's list, I could almost be like, yeah, that stands up too. Like, if I were to watch these movies again, maybe I would find more things that I'd be like, oh, that's not so bad. But like, we're just like picking, right? Like, which one's the least worse? We're not like, this one's the 10 out of 10 one.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, same thing when we've done tier lists. I'm always ranking them in their universe because you cannot
Yeah.
compare them to other stuff. With Andy a couple weeks ago, I did the Arrowverse, and you're grading that in its own bubble. You have to with that stuff.
You have to.
It wouldn't
Yeah.
be fair otherwise.
Can I ask you a question? Just fun?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
This week's question of the week was, of the announced DCU TV shows or films, what are you most excited about? Chris, of the stuff we know they're making, what are you looking forward to?
You had to do me a DCU one, didn't you? You know how I feel about,
I do.
about Gunn and the DCU.
Yep.
I'm interested to see what he does with Superman, to tell you the honest truth.
Sure.
I know
Okay.
we have a photo, and I mean, you and I got the opportunity to go see Spider-Man in concert with an orchestra, and that was
Superman.
phenomenal. Yeah. Oh, Superman. Sorry, I still got
Your
that was
Kraven brain.
Superman.
Yes.
Right, Craven Brain. Superman in concert with an orchestra, which was amazing and like revitalized my faith in all of that. And I'm interested to see what they do with it. There's a lot of talk, so I'm expecting big things and I'm hopeful for big things. Anything else of that, I don't know. I don't know if I want a different Wonder Woman right now. I don't,
Sure.
like,
I think that's totally fair. I'm actually
yeah.
most interested in, like, we're going to get Supergirl World of Tomorrow, and you have to remind me to lend you my trade paperback because it's brilliant. But
Right.
from a lot of the things they've announced, I think even if they're great, I don't feel like they're going to be great examples of how this universe is succinctly its own. I'm really looking forward to, if done well, and you're using big words like True Detective, but Kyle Chandler, and I don't want to mess up the actor's name, so I'm going to pull it up really quickly because knowing me, I would mess it up. Where's his name? Aaron Pierre, who ironically is in a film I'm reviewing next week. His Jon Stewart, this is going to be the live action debut of him. And Kyle Chandler, you throw a flight jacket on that guy with some aviators, that's Hal Jordan. So if they can actually do some sort of compelling mystery, maybe around Parallax or something, or lanterns disappearing, dealing with the emotional spectrum of the different lantern cores, there's a lot to mine in there. So if that's done really well, managing the superhero-ness, but also just being a great television series, like something where you're like, wow, that was as good as Penguin or Daredevil. Like that would be, I think, a really big swing. A new Batman world. Sure, I love fantastical Batman. And Mike Flanagan working on Clayface, I think that's brilliant. But this is going to be something wholly new because The only Green Lantern things we ever got from the DCEU was in the flashback, which was awesome, but there was no modern things with that. So I'm looking forward to that. Scotty Cameron wrote in a novel, so let's get started. If I had to pick a DCU project I look forward to the most, it's probably The Authority, because I am just so curious how they'll be handled in the DCU. Given The Authority are this morally ambiguous team of superheroes who are willing to get their hands dirty if they need be, I'd like to see how they are introduced and how they'd work with the Justice League once a JL team is formed. It also sparks my curiosity on how much of the Wildstorm content is coming to the DCU. We will see Stormwatch and Wildcats in the DC too. The Grifter would be an interesting character to see in this universe. Mr. Majestic would also be an interesting character to see, honestly. Henry Cavill is a good casting choice for that character. I wonder if Gunn plans on bringing Kev Hawkins or Gareth Ennis creation for The Authority into the DCU. Obviously, there's a low-hanging fruit of movies and shows I'm looking forward to. Superman, Supergirl, World of Tomorrow, The Brave and the Bold, in brackets. It's Batman, Paradise Lost, and Lanterns. The Authority just stands out to me more because it's a little niche. And there's more! Yeah, I understand that you wanted Melissa Benoist to appear in the show, preferably as Supergirl, given that Tyler Hoechlin is Superman. Also, David Ramsey's Diggle appeared in the show too. It's weird he stops appearing after the show is confirmed to not be in the Arrowverse. I also thought Supergirl being Supergirl went without saying. Yeah, the discussion is over as far as DC is concerned because both the Arrowverse and the DCEU are dead. So the multiverse discussion as far as DC mega franchises are concerned is dead until the DCU inevitably jumps into the multiverse terrain. Really, it's just Marvel now with the multiverse saga, and people now wanting to see Blade or X-Men are the first MCU movies, even though those weren't set in the MCU, and the MCU wasn't even a concept when those movies came out. Those movie universes exist in the same multiverse as the MCU. The MCU started with Iron Man. Really, the hot discussion with DC movies and shows now is how much of James Gunn's DCEU movies and shows will actually be canon to the DCU. We know the events of the Suicide Squad as they relate to Weasel, Flag, and Peacemaker are canon, and most of Peacemaker Season 1 is canon. However, as Gunn confirmed, there are enough discrepancies in how they will play out in the DCEU versus the DCU that those aren't canon. In the case of Peacemaker, its first season is mostly canon, and the Suicide Squad, it's partially canon. Blue Beetle is also partially canon, maybe just the origin story from the film, so we won't have Blue Beetle's origin story retold to us for the DCU. There's enough room for the events to be altered. I don't imagine Captain Boomerang's death from the Suicide Squad will actually be upheld because that seems like a character you'd want to use in the DCU. Gunn's also given non-answers to whether or not we'd see Margot Robbie play Harley Quinn in the DCU. He's floating the idea of having her play a new character in the DCU. When it comes to Viola Davis, John Cena, and Xolo Maridueña, Gunn unequivocally says those actors are reprising their roles. No non-answers, or maybe we'll do this. So we'll see if he will cast a new Harley and thus retconning Harley's involvement with Project Starfish. Will the same be true for Bloodsport since he shot Henry Cavill's Superman with a kryptonite bullet? Will Idris Elba get a new character, or will Bloodsport just be a non-DCU character? We've already seen Gunn cast actors who were in the Suicide Squad like Nathan Fillion and Sean Gunn as different characters in the DCU. So will we get more the Suicide Squad actors in new roles? And then there's an amendment. Sean Gunn is still voicing Weasel. He's playing Calendar Man in the Suicide Squad, and now he's playing Maxwell Lord in Superman. That means the Calendar Man we saw Bully, Bloodsport, and Polka Dot Man doesn't exist in the DCU. Gunn isn't double casting live action roles, just animated and CGI ones. Fillion was TDK, who we never see die, just get his arms injured. We never see a dead body, so the chances are TDK lived. That doesn't matter anymore because Nathan Fillion is Guy Gardner, so there's no TDK in the DCU. Oh my God, Scotty Cameron, I appreciate the novel so much, but please next time try to slim them down just a little bit. That would be amazing. Dylan Pollock of Movies to Watch Before You Die. I'm most excited for Lanterns. Grew up a huge fan of the comics, and it'll be nice to see another attempt since there's been nothing really since Ryan Reynolds' version. James Strecker of Jump on the Batwagon and the Watchtower Database said, Clayface movie concept sounds pretty cool, though I'll have to wait and learn more about it. I guess the Green Lantern show is probably what I'm most excited for. Keen writes in, if it's true they're giving Waller her own show that's tied to the DCU, that's very exciting to me. I always loved Waller's character, and her very gray alignment, whether she's working with heroes, villains, or anyone in between. She's a fantastic character, and Viola Davis portrays her fantastically. Keep it keen, keen machine. And Andy writes in Superman and Lanterns. I know it's funny to me that we haven't really heard a ton from the actual other films that have been announced, but outside of Supergirl, World of Tomorrow, we don't really know a ton about that, which is cool. It is nice to have optimism around the DCU currently. Creature Commandos continues to be quite good. At the time of this recording, I have seen episode 3 and I did enjoy it very much. This week's question of the week is, what Spider-Man villain that Andrew Garfield didn't face would you like to see in potentially an eventual Amazing Spider-Man 3? So that's this week's question. In the Amazing Spider-Man 3, who would you like to see Andrew Garfield fight? To respond to the question of the week, you can answer directly on Spotify, you can comment on YouTube, or you can send an email to filmrealistpod@gmail.com. Chris, thanks so much for joining me to talk about SPUM and Kraven the Hunter.
I'm so sad that SPUM's over now, and yet not sad at the same time.
It is,
I'm
yes.
hoping these universes figure themselves out, right?
Well, as Thanos stated, all things are balanced, or it is perfectly balanced as all things should be. Next week's episode, which will be the second last of the year, is going to be a big one. Chris is probably going to be like, oh, really? But I'm going to be reviewing Mufasa the Lion King, which I am actually really curious about, and Sonic 3, the vastly superior video game franchise. So I'm not video game, sorry, film franchise. I'm really looking forward to Sonic 3. So both those reviews will be in next week's episode. If you love the show, or maybe you didn't, or you feel like being generous, or not, sorry, I'm doing this wrong. Rob told me I have to be more confident. Give the show a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you don't have an iPhone, buy an iPhone or an iPad, and then rate the show 5 stars, because it's the nice thing to do. And I'm Canadian. Please do this for me. I'm sorry. Anyways, the podcast is available on all podcast platforms as well. Like and share with your film-loving friends, potentially the ramblings of two friends over a really bad movie. Maybe they might be interested in that. My name's Kyle Naranya. I'll see you next time.